Anya Sharma had always found a certain peace in the quiet order of a well-kept garden. After 15 years in the army, serving as a combat engineer in places where the only thing that grew was chaos, the neat rows of flowers and the sturdy green line of her privet hedge were more than just plants. They were a symbol of the quiet, predictable life she had earned. Her little house in the sleepy suburban town of Maple Creek, Ohio, was her sanctuary, a place where the loudest sound was supposed to be the buzz of a lawnmower on a Saturday afternoon, not the grating whine of a neighbor's unsolicited opinion. That peace was shattered on a bright Tuesday morning in June. Anya was in her kitchen, methodically cleaning her coffee maker, a ritual she found soothing. Her hands, scarred and strong from years of handling everything from delicate wiring to heavy machinery, were gentle as she worked. Through the window over her sink, she could see her front yard, a patch of emerald green she meticulously cared for. The hedge, a thick, 6-foot wall of glossy leaves, stood as a proud barrier between her property and the sidewalk. It was her living fence, her line of demarcation between her world and the one outside. Then she saw it, a flash of garish pink moving along her property line. It was Karen, her next-door neighbor. Karen, with her perfectly coiffed blonde hair that looked like a helmet, her perpetually pursed lips, and her uncanny ability to find fault in a flawless sky. She was wielding a pair of electric hedge trimmers with a terrifying lack of skill, hacking away at Anya's beloved privet hedge. Anya froze, the part of the coffee maker in her hand forgotten. She watched for a moment, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. This wasn't a friendly trim. Karen was butchering it. Branches were being locked off unevenly, leaving jagged, wounded-looking stumps. Leaves were shredded, and the once uniform green wall now had a gaping, ugly wound carved into its side. She was cutting it down to a pathetic 3 feet, exposing Anya's front window to the street. Taking a slow, calming breath, the kind she practiced in dusty, dangerous places a world away, Anya put the coffee filter down. She wiped her hands on a towel, her movements deliberate. Panic and anger were luxuries you couldn't afford in a firefight, and she learned to treat every confrontation with the same measured calm. She walked to her front door, opened it, and stepped onto her porch. "Karen," she called out, her voice even but firm. It carried easily across the lawn, a voice trained to cut through the noise of engines and explosions. Karen jumped, startled, and the hedge trimmers whirred dangerously close to her own leg. She shut them off and turned, a fake, sugary smile plastered on her face. "Oh, Anya, good morning. I was just helping you out." Anya walked down the porch steps and across the grass, stopping a few feet from the mangled hedge. She looked at the damage, her jaw tightening. "Helping me out?" she repeated, keeping her tone neutral. "Yes, dear," Karen said, patting her helmet of hair. This hedge was getting so unruly. It was making the whole neighborhood look untidy, and it was blocking the view from my sunroom. You have to think about property values, you know. Anya's eyes met Karen's. Anya was a woman of average height, but her presence was anything but. She stood with a straight spine, her shoulders back, a posture of quiet confidence that years in uniform had made second nature. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple, no-nonsense ponytail, and her brown eyes were clear and direct. They held no malice, only a steady, unwavering focus that seemed to unnerve Karen. "My hedge is on my property, Karen," Anya said simply. "You don't have the right to touch it." Karen's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance. "Well, I think you'll find that city ordinance says hedges can't be over 6 feet. Yours was well on its way. I was doing you a favor, preventing you from getting a fine." "It was exactly 6 feet," Anya replied. "I measure it every month. And even if it were over, that would be a matter for the city to address with me, not for you to take into your own hands." The sugary facade was melting away completely now. Karen's voice took on a sharp, condescending edge. "Look, I've lived in this neighborhood for 20 years. We have certain standards. You're new here. Maybe you don't understand how things work in a nice, civilized community." She gestured vaguely at Anya's house. "We all try to keep up appearances." The implication was clear. Anya's house, a modest but well-maintained single-story home, was somehow not up to snuff. Anya knew her house wasn't as grand as Karen's 2-story colonial with its perfectly manicured rose bushes and a lawn so perfect it looked like artificial turf. Anya's focus was on function and security, not ornamentation. Her fence was sturdy, her locks were heavy-duty, and her windows were new and energy-efficient. She didn't have decorative shutters or a welcome mat that said something clever. "I understand perfectly," Anya said, her voice dropping a little, becoming quieter but somehow more intense. "I understand property lines. I understand respect. And I understand that you have damaged my property. I'm going to have to ask you to step away from my hedge and get off my lawn." Karen scoffed, a disbelieving little laugh. "Or what? What's a little thing like you going to do about it?" It was a classic mistake, one Anya had seen men far more intimidating than Karen make. They saw her gender, her quiet demeanor, and they underestimated her. They didn't see the steel in her spine, the discipline etched into her very being. They didn't know that she could assemble a field-expedient bridge from scrap metal or calculate the load-bearing capacity of a damaged wall in her head. They didn't know that her quietness was a measure of control, not weakness. Anya didn't raise her voice. She didn't move a muscle. She just held Karen's gaze. "I'm not going to argue with you, Karen. I'm telling you to leave my property. Now." There was something in her eyes, a depth and a seriousness that finally seemed to penetrate Karen's bubble of suburban entitlement. Karen's face flushed a blotchy red. She threw the hedge trimmers down on her own lawn with a clatter. "Fine. See if I ever try to help you again. Some people are just so ungrateful," she huffed. She turned on her heel and stomped back toward her house, muttering under her breath about renters and falling standards, even though Anya owned her home outright. Anya stood there for a long time after Karen had slammed her door. She looked at the butchered remains of her hedge. It was more than just a plant. It was the first line of defense for her sanctuary. It was the boundary she had set for herself, a way to feel safe and separate after years of living with no privacy and constant threat. Karen hadn't just cut some branches. She had crossed a line, violated a boundary, and in doing so, had declared a war Anya had no interest in fighting, but one she would not, could not lose. She walked over to the hedge and gently touched a splintered branch. The leaves were already starting to wilt in the sun. It would take years for it to grow back to its former height and thickness. Years of her peace, her privacy, compromised, all because of the petty tyranny of a woman who thought her opinion was law. Anya's mind, trained to assess threats and formulate responses, began to work. A simple hedge was no longer enough. A living fence was vulnerable to any neighbor with a tool and a grudge. She needed something more, something permanent, something that sent a clear, unmistakable message: do not cross this line. She went back inside, her calm exterior still intact, but inside, a familiar feeling was awakening. It was the feeling she got when faced with a problem that required a structural solution. It was the engineer in her, the soldier, the builder. Karen thought she had won a victory, asserted her dominance by cutting down a few feet of foliage. She had no idea what she had just started. She had no idea that in trying to tear down Anya's simple green wall, she had just laid the foundation for a fortress. Anya walked over to her desk, pulled out a notepad and a pen, and began to sketch. The days following the hedge incident were filled with a tense, unnatural quiet. Anya saw Karen coming and going, always with a smug, triumphant look on her face. Karen would make a point of waving cheerfully to other neighbors while pointedly ignoring Anya, a piece of social theater designed to isolate her. Anya, for her part, simply went about her business. She mowed her lawn, tended to her flower beds, and did her best to clean up the mess Karen had made of her hedge, trimming the jagged edges into something resembling a clean line, though it did little to hide the damage. She knew she was being watched. From behind the pristine curtains of Karen's sunroom, she could feel eyes on her. It was a feeling she was familiar with, the prickle on the back of your neck that tells you you're in someone's sights. In the past, that feeling had meant a sniper or an IED. Now it just meant a bored, malicious woman with too much time on her hands. The threat was different, but the instinct to secure her position was the same. Anya spent her evenings at her drafting table, a sturdy old piece of furniture she'd salvaged and refinished herself. Under the bright, focused light of her desk lamp, she worked with the precision of a surgeon. She wasn't just drawing a fence, she was designing a perimeter. She consulted Maple Creek city ordinances online, downloading and printing every relevant page. She studied zoning laws, height restrictions, material requirements, and setback rules. Karen had tried to use the law as a weapon against her. Anya would use it as her shield and her sword. The plan that began to take shape on the paper was ambitious. It was not a simple wooden fence or a chain-link barrier. It was a system. The foundation would be a low 2-foot wall of locally sourced river stone, a solid, immovable base. On top of this wall, she designed a custom fence of black, powder-coated steel. The vertical bars were simple and clean, but closer together than standard fencing, offering more privacy. The top was not adorned with aggressive spikes, but with a smooth, flat rail, elegant and understated. The city ordinance for her zone capped non-living fences at 6 feet. Her design, from the ground to the top rail, would be exactly 6 feet, not a millimeter over. But the fence was just the beginning. The gate was her masterpiece. It would be a solid steel gate, operated electronically with a keypad and a remote. It was designed to look heavy and intimidating, a modern portcullis for her suburban castle. And woven into the design, in a subtle, almost hidden way, was a pattern. It was a geometric design that, to the casual observer, would look like a simple decorative element. But to anyone who knew, to anyone who had served with her, they would recognize the insignia of her old combat engineer battalion. It was a quiet nod to her past, a signature on her work. She also planned for landscaping. The butchered privet hedge would be removed. In its place, on her side of the new wall, she planned a row of Swedish columnar aspens. They were fast-growing, tall, and narrow, and would quickly create a green screen of privacy that would tower over the fence, perfectly legal as trees were not subject to the same height restrictions. Along the base of the stone wall, she planned to plant a thorny variety of climbing rose, beautiful to look at, but a painful deterrent to anyone who tried to climb it. The project would be expensive, but Anya had been saving diligently for years. She had always planned to make improvements to her home, but she had envisioned a new kitchen or a deck in the backyard. Instead, her savings would now be invested in her peace of mind. It was a price she was willing to pay. One Saturday morning, as Anya was taking precise measurements of her property line, a surveyor's wheel clicking softly on the pavement, Karen emerged from her house. She was dressed in tennis whites, though Anya had never seen her on a court. "More gardening?" Karen called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Surveying," Anya replied without looking up, her focus on the task at hand. "Surveying? What on earth for?" Karen asked, walking closer, her curiosity getting the better of her. She stopped just on her side of the property line, a silent, invisible wall that Anya was about to make very real. "For a project," Anya said, straightening up and finally looking at Karen. She held her gaze, her expression unreadable. Karen's eyes narrowed. "What kind of project? You're not thinking of putting up one of those ugly chain-link fences, are you?" "This is a respectable neighborhood. We don't put up ugly fences. It will be up to code," Anya said, turning her attention back to her measurements. This vague answer clearly infuriated Karen. She wanted details. She wanted something to object to, something to rally the neighborhood against. "Well, I'm on the board of the homeowners association, you know," she said, puffing out her chest slightly. "Any major construction has to be approved by the board." It was a lie, and Anya knew it. Maple Creek had a city council and zoning board, but there was no HOA in their specific subdivision. It was a bluff, an attempt to intimidate. Anya gave a slow, deliberate nod. "I'm aware of all the relevant governing bodies," she said. "I'll be submitting my plans to the city for the proper permits on Monday." She then rolled up her measuring tape, the metal sliding back into the case with a sharp, final-sounding zip. She turned and walked back to her house, leaving Karen standing on the sidewalk, sputtering with frustration. True to her word, Anya was at the Maple Creek Municipal Building first thing Monday morning. She had her plans, multiple copies, rolled into neat tubes. She had a folder with all the necessary application forms, already filled out. She had read every line of the city code and was prepared for any questions or objections. The man at the planning department counter, a weary-looking gentleman named George with a coffee-stained tie, looked at her plans with surprise. He was used to homeowners coming in with crude, hand-drawn sketches on notebook paper. Anya's plans were professional, computer-aided designs with clear specifications for materials, dimensions, and construction methods. "Ma'am, did you have an architect draw these up?" George asked, impressed. "I drew them myself," Anya said. "I have a background in engineering." George raised his eyebrows. He spent a few minutes looking everything over, checking her measurements against the city plat map. "Well," he said finally, stamping her application with a loud thud, "everything seems to be in perfect order. The design is well within code. You should have your permit within 10 business days." Anya thanked him, took her receipt, and left. The first step was complete. The gears were in motion. The notice from the city, a small white sign posted on a stake in her front yard announcing a pending construction permit, went up 2 days later. It was like a declaration of war. Within an hour, Karen was at her door, her face a mask of fury. "A 6-foot stone and steel wall? Are you insane?" she shrieked, waving a copy of the permit application which she had clearly gone down to the city hall to get. "This isn't a prison. This is a friendly, open neighborhood. It's my property, Karen," Anya said calmly from her doorway. "And the wall is perfectly legal." I'll fight this. I'll talk to the neighbors. We'll sign a petition. We will not have our neighborhood turned into some kind of military compound by someone like you." The words hung in the air, someone like you. The quiet, single woman. The veteran. The person who didn't fit into Karen's narrow, manicured world. Anya's expression didn't change, but a cold resolve settled deep in her bones. "You do what you feel you have to do," she said, and then she slowly and deliberately closed the door in Karen's face. The battle lines were drawn. Karen thought the fight was about fences and property values. Anya knew it was about something more fundamental. It was about the right to be left alone, the right to feel secure in her own home. And as she looked at the detailed blueprints spread across her table, she knew her fortress would be more than just stone and steel. It would be a monument to her resilience. The arrival of the construction crew was an event in Maple Creek. A large flat truck rumbled down the quiet street early one morning, carrying pallets of river stone and bundles of black steel. It was followed by a small excavator that tore up Anya's front lawn with surgical precision, digging a deep, straight trench along the property line where the hedge had once stood. The noise of machinery and the shouts of the workers shattered the neighborhood's suburban tranquility. Anya had hired a local company run by a fellow veteran, a man named Dave who had served in the Navy Seabees. He understood her plans immediately, appreciating the precision and the no-nonsense design. He had looked at her blueprints, given a low whistle of respect, and said, "You're not messing around." "Are you, ma'am?" "No, Dave, I'm not," she had replied. From her window, Anya watched the neighborhood's reaction. Curtains twitched. People on their morning walks slowed down, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and disapproval. And then there was Karen. She was a whirlwind of frantic energy, marching from her house to the edge of Anya's property, her phone pressed to her ear. She was documenting everything, taking pictures of the truck, the workers, the trench. She was building her case. Later that day, Karen began her campaign in earnest. She went door to door, a clipboard in her hand and a look of grave concern on her face. Anya could see her through the window, talking to Mr. Henderson from across the street, gesticulating wildly towards Anya's yard. She saw old Mrs. Gable from 2 doors down shaking her head sadly. Karen was poisoning the well, painting Anya as a hostile, unstable outsider who was destroying the neighborhood's character. Anya had expected this. She knew that a quiet defense was not enough. She needed to control the narrative. That evening, after the work crew had left, she put her own plan into action. She had baked 24 lemon poppy seed muffins, her grandmother's recipe. She placed them in small bags, 2 per bag, and tied each with a simple ribbon. Tucked into the ribbon was a small, neatly printed card. The card read, "Dear neighbor, I know the construction at my home is a bit of a disruption, and I wanted to thank you for your patience. I'm making some much-needed security and privacy upgrades to my property. I'm looking forward to the project being completed quickly and quietly. Once it's done, I hope you'll find it to be a tasteful addition to our street. Sincerely, Anya Sharma, 112 Oak Street." She then walked the neighborhood, going to every house except Karen's. She didn't try to argue or plead her case. She simply offered the muffins with a warm, genuine smile. "Hi, I'm Anya from down the street," she'd say. "I just wanted to apologize for the noise and thank you for your patience." The reaction was immediate and powerful. People were disarmed by her directness and her kindness. Mr. Henderson, a retired history teacher, looked at her thoughtfully. "That woman from next door to you was just here," he said, his voice a low rumble, "telling us you were building some kind of monstrosity." Anya just smiled. "It's a stone and steel fence, Mr. Henderson. 6 feet tall, city approved. I value my privacy, that's all." "A person's home is their castle," he said with a nod, taking the muffins. "Don't you let anyone tell you different." The tide began to turn. The neighbors were still curious about the wall, but Karen's narrative of a crazy, antisocial veteran was being replaced by the reality of a polite, reasonable woman who baked excellent muffins. The construction continued at a rapid pace. Dave's crew was efficient and professional. The concrete foundation was poured, and then the stonemasons began their work. They were true artisans, carefully selecting each river stone, fitting them together like a complex puzzle. The low wall rose from the ground, solid and beautiful, a ribbon of gray, tan, and brown stone that looked as if it had always been there. Karen, however, was not giving up. She called the city planning department daily, complaining about the noise, the work hours, the placement of the portable toilet. Each time, an inspector would come out, check Dave's permits, measure the noise levels, and find everything to be in perfect compliance. She tried to claim the wall was encroaching on her property. Anya, anticipating this, had paid for a new official survey before the work began. The survey flags, planted by a licensed surveyor, clearly showed the wall was a full 6 inches on Anya's side of the line. Her efforts grew more desperate. One afternoon, she stood on her lawn and began yelling at the workers, accusing them of trampling her prize-winning petunias. Dave, a large man with a calm demeanor, walked over to her. "Ma'am," he said, his voice polite but firm, "my men have not set foot on your property. I can assure you of that." "I saw them," Karen shrieked. "They're clumsy and careless." "Ma'am, we have a camera on our truck that records the entire worksite for insurance purposes," Dave said calmly. "If you'd like, we can review the footage together." Karen's face went pale. She knew she was lying. Muttering something about calling her lawyer, she retreated back into her house. The day the steel fence panels arrived was a turning point. As the workers began hoisting the heavy black sections and bolting them to the top of the stone wall, the full impact of Anya's design became clear. It wasn't a cage. It wasn't prison wall. It was elegant. The clean vertical lines gave it a sense of height and strength, but the dark color helped it recede into the background, especially against the green of the trees in Anya's yard. Mr. Henderson came over, standing on the sidewalk and admiring the work. "You designed this yourself, young lady?" he asked. "I did," Anya confirmed. "It has a certain dignity to it," he said, nodding in approval. "It's strong, but it's not angry. I like it." That evening, the final piece was installed, the gate. It was delivered on a separate truck, a single massive piece of steel. A specialized team worked for hours, setting the heavy posts in deep concrete footings and wiring the electronic motor. When they were finished, Dave called Anya outside. He handed her a small remote. "Go ahead, ma'am. Give it a try." Anya pressed the button. With a barely audible hum, the heavy gate slid sideways, gliding smoothly along its track until it was fully open, revealing her driveway. She pressed the button again, and it slid silently back into place, closing with a solid, satisfying click. She ran her hand over the cool, smooth steel. She traced the geometric pattern woven into the center, her battalion's insignia. It was a private symbol of her strength, hidden in plain sight. She looked at her house, now framed by the stone and steel. The wall didn't make her home look like a prison. It made it look protected. It made it look like a sanctuary. For the first time since Karen had taken the trimmers to her hedge, Anya felt a sense of profound peace settle over her. But she knew the war wasn't over. Karen had been quiet for the last few days, and Anya knew that a quiet Karen was a plotting Karen. The walls were up, but the siege was just beginning. With the wall complete, a new kind of battle began. It was a cold war, fought not with machinery and permits, but with whispers, glares, and acts of petty sabotage. Karen, having failed to stop the construction, now seemed determined to make Anya's life within her fortress as miserable as possible. The first salvo was light. Karen installed a set of powerful, motion-activated floodlights on the side of her house, aimed directly at Anya's bedroom window. They were so sensitive that a passing firefly or a gust of wind would trigger them, flooding Anya's room with harsh, invasive light at all hours of the night. Anya's first instinct was to retaliate, to use her own engineering skills to devise some countermeasure. But she resisted. That was Karen's game, a race to the bottom. Instead, Anya went to a home improvement store and bought a high-quality set of blackout curtains. They were thick, heavy, and completely blocked the light. It was a simple defensive solution. She refused to be drawn into an escalating conflict. Next came the noise. Karen started leading a small radio on her porch, tuned to a static-filled talk radio station, and turned up just loud enough to be a constant, irritating buzz in Anya's backyard. It was her attempt to breach the wall with sound, to deny Anya the peace of her own garden. Again, Anya chose a peaceful solution. She installed a small, tasteful water feature in her backyard, a fountain that created a gentle, soothing sound of flowing water that easily masked the radio's annoying hiss. Her sanctuary would remain serene. But Karen's attacks grew more personal. She started spreading rumors. She told the neighbors that Anya was a discharged veteran, implying some kind of dishonorable past. She suggested that Anya had severe PTSD and was paranoid, hence the insane fortress. She tried to paint Anya as a danger to the community, a ticking time bomb of instability. This was the attack that hurt the most. Anya's service was a source of quiet pride. She had served her country honorably, and she had seen friends sacrifice everything. to have her service twisted and used as a weapon against her cut deeper than any insult about her property. The injustice of it settled in her chest, a heavy, cold weight. One evening, as she was watering her new aspen trees, Mr. Henderson walked over from his house across the street. He leaned on the new wall, his old, wrinkled hands resting on the cool stone. "Evening, Anya," he said, his voice kind. "Good evening, Mr. Henderson," she replied, offering him a small smile. He was quiet for a moment, watching her. "I was a teacher for 40 years, he said finally. "Taught American history. I learned a thing or two about people. And I learned a thing or two about bullies." Anya stopped watering and looked at him. "A bully's greatest weapon isn't their fists," he continued. "It's their ability to make you feel alone, to make you think that everyone is against you." He paused, his eyes meeting hers. "Don't you let her do that to you. She doesn't speak for this whole neighborhood, not by a long shot." Anya felt a lump form in her throat. His simple words of support were like a lifeline. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot. Just call me George," he said with a wink. "And if you ever need anything, you just let me know." George's support was a turning point for Anya. It reminded her that she wasn't alone. It also strengthened her resolve to handle this situation her way, with dignity, strength, and strategic patience. Her patience was tested a few weeks later. Anya had ordered a custom-made metal sign with her house number, 112, to be mounted on the stone wall next to her gate. It was delivered while she was out running errands. The delivery driver, in a hurry, left the package leaning against the outside of her gate. When Anya returned, the package was gone. She knew, with a certainty that required no proof, that Karen had taken it. There was no other explanation. She walked over to Karen's house and rang the doorbell. Karen answered, a look of feigned surprise on her face. "Anya, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "My package was delivered here by mistake, Karen. It was left leaning against my gate." "I need it back," Anya said, her voice devoid of accusation, a simple statement of fact. Karen's eyes widened in mock innocence. "A package? I haven't seen any package. Are you sure it was delivered? You know how unreliable those delivery people can be." "It was delivered," Anya said, her gaze steady. "The driver sent a photo confirmation. It shows the package leaning against my gate, with the corner of your driveway visible in the picture." It was a bluff. Anya had no such photo, but she knew Karen's mindset. The fear of being caught, of having concrete evidence against her, would be powerful. Karen's composure cracked. A flicker of panic crossed her face before she quickly masked it. "Well, I certainly haven't seen it. Maybe the wind blew it away, or maybe some kids took it. You really can't be too careful these days. It's a good thing you have that big, ugly wall to protect you." Anya knew she wouldn't get the package back. Karen would never admit to taking it. But Anya had achieved her primary objective. She had let Karen know that she was on to her, that her petty crimes would not go unnoticed. "Just keep an eye out for it, will you?" Anya said, her voice still calm. "It's a metal sign, not worth much to anyone else, but it's important to me." She turned and walked away, feeling the weight of Karen's hateful glare on her back. That night, Anya felt a profound sense of weariness. This constant vigilance was exhausting. It was like being on patrol in her own neighborhood. She sat in her quiet living room, the blackout curtains drawn, and thought about the life she had wanted here. A life of peace, of quiet solitude. Instead, she was under siege. She thought about giving in, about selling the house and moving somewhere else, somewhere anonymous where no one would bother her. But then she thought of the satisfaction that would give Karen. She thought of the principle of the thing. She had fought for her country, for the rights of others to live in peace. She would not, could not surrender her own. She looked at her hands. They were capable hands. They had built things and they had defended things. This home was hers. This peace was hers. She had earned it. Her resolve hardened once more. This was not just a fight against a neighborhood bully. It was a fight for her right to exist peacefully. Karen's strategy was to wear her down, to break her spirit with 1,000 tiny cuts. Anya's strategy would be to endure, to stand her ground, to be as immovable and as patient as the stone wall she had built. The siege would continue, but the fortress and the woman inside it would not fall. Autumn arrived in Maple Creek, painting the leaves in fiery shades of red and gold. Anya's columnar aspen trees, planted just a few months earlier, had grown surprisingly fast, their slender forms already creating a soft, rustling screen of privacy above the steel fence. The climbing roses she had planted at the base of the stone wall were thriving, their thorny vines beginning to snake their way across the stones. Her fortress was settling into the landscape, becoming a part of the neighborhood, much to Karen's continuing dismay. The wall had become a local landmark of sorts. People would slow their cars as they drove by. Some, Anya knew, still saw it as an eyesore, a monument to a feud. But others, she was beginning to learn, saw it differently. They saw strength. They saw a woman who refused to be pushed around. The neighborhood, once united in its quiet disapproval, was now divided. There were those who sided with Karen, who saw Anya as an aggressor. And there were those, like George Henderson, who quietly admired Anya's fortitude. Anya had found a new routine, a new sense of normalcy within her secured perimeter. She spent her weekends working in her yard, creating a beautiful, secluded garden in the back, a true sanctuary hidden from the world. She installed solar-powered lights along her walkway and a state-of-the-art security camera system, not because she was paranoid, but because she was prudent. Each addition was a quiet act of defiance, a reinforcement of her space. Karen, for her part, had not given up. Her tactics, however, had shifted. The direct harassment had stopped, replaced by something more insidious. She had started a neighborhood watch blog. On the surface, it was about safety and community events, but woven into the posts were subtle, and not so subtle, digs at Anya. She would write about the importance of maintaining our neighborhood's open and friendly aesthetic. A clear reference to Anya's wall. She posted about newcomers who don't understand our community values. She even wrote a post about the importance of checking on the mental well-being of veterans, framing it as a concern for their stability, a thinly veiled attempt to pathologize Anya. Anya read the blog, not with anger, but with a clinical detachment. She was gathering intelligence, understanding her opponent's strategy. Karen was trying to build a public case against her, to cast herself as the concerned citizen and Anya as the unstable threat. It was a classic psychological operation, and Anya recognized it for what it was. One crisp October evening, Anya was on her back patio enjoying a cup of tea when she saw a small drone hovering over her yard. It rose from the direction of Karen's property, buzzed over her garden, and then zipped back. It was a blatant invasion of her privacy, a clear escalation. The next day, a picture appeared on Karen's blog. It was an aerial shot of Anya's backyard, taken by the drone. The caption read, "What is our neighbor hiding behind her fortress walls? An extensive surveillance system, and who knows what else? Is this what we want in Maple Creek?" The post caused a stir. Some commenters expressed alarm, buying into Karen's narrative, but others came to Anya's defense. George Henderson wrote a scathing comment, "What she is hiding is her private property, Karen. The only person breaking the law here is the one flying a drone over someone's home and posting pictures of it online without their consent. This has gone from a neighborhood dispute to harassment, and it needs to stop." The comment received dozens of likes, and soon others followed, telling Karen she had gone too far. The public opinion was turning against Karen. Her obsession was becoming obvious, her malice too transparent. She was no longer the guardian of neighborhood standards. She was becoming the neighborhood bully, the crazy lady who couldn't let go of a grudge. The drone incident was the final piece of evidence Anya needed. She had been quietly documenting everything. The floodlights, the radio, the stolen package, the blog posts. She had saved screenshots, logged dates and times, and even had a recording from one of her security cameras of Karen placing the radio on her porch. She now had a clear pattern of harassment. She contacted a lawyer, a woman who specialized in property disputes and harassment cases. The lawyer reviewed Anya's evidence and was impressed by its thoroughness. "You have a very strong case for a restraining order," the lawyer advised. "Her behavior is escalating, and the drone is a clear violation of your privacy." Anya considered it. A restraining order would be a legal victory, a court-ordered peace, but something held her back. It felt like another defensive move, another reaction to Karen's aggression. Anya had spent her whole life building things, solving problems, creating order out of chaos. She wanted a solution, not just a truce. She wanted to end this, once and for all, on her own terms. "Not yet," Anya told the lawyer. "Let's just keep this on file for now. I have a feeling the situation will resolve itself soon." The lawyer was skeptical, but agreed. Anya left the office feeling a strange sense of calm. She felt that the climax was approaching. All the pieces were in place. Karen, backed into a corner by the shifting neighborhood opinion, was bound to do something desperate, something that would expose her completely. All Anya had to do was wait. The wait was not long. A week later, the weather forecast began to issue severe storm warnings. A massive system that had formed in the Gulf was tracking northward, and it was predicted to bring torrential rain and tornado-force winds to their part of Ohio. It was being called a superstorm, a once-in-a-generation weather event. The town of Maple Creek began to prepare. People boarded up windows and stocked up on supplies. Anya, as always, was ahead of the curve. Her house was built to last. Her new windows were impact-resistant. She had a generator, and her pantry was well stocked. She checked the drainage around her property, ensuring that water would flow away from her foundation. Her wall, with its deep concrete footings and solid stone base, was more than just a privacy fence. It was a bulwark. The day the storm was set to arrive, the sky turned a bruised, sickly yellow. The wind began to howl, and the first drops of rain, heavy and cold, began to fall. As Anya did a final check of her property, she glanced over at Karen's house. Karen was in a panic. She was struggling to nail a sheet of plywood over her large sunroom window, the very window she claimed Anya's hedge had been blocking. The wind was whipping the plywood around, and she was clearly not strong enough to handle it on her own. Her husband was out of town on business, a fact Karen had loudly complained about at the grocery store earlier that week. Anya watched for a moment. Every instinct for self-preservation told her to go inside, lock her door, and let Karen fend for herself. Karen had brought all this negativity on herself. She deserved to be left alone to face the consequences. But then, another instinct kicked in. The instinct of a soldier. You don't leave someone behind in a danger zone, no matter who they are. You secure the perimeter, and then you help those in need. It was the code she had lived by for 15 years. With a heavy sigh, Anya unlocked her gate, the heavy steel sliding open, and walked across her lawn toward her enemy's house. The storm was coming, and the siege of Oak Street was about to take a very unexpected turn. The wind tore at Anya's jacket as she crossed the lawn that separated her property from Karen's. Rain was starting to come down in sheets, cold and stinging. Karen was still struggling with the sheet of plywood, her face a mask of frustration and fear. She hadn't even noticed Anya approaching. "You need to angle it against the wind." Anya shouted over the roar of the storm. "Use the house as a shield." Karen jumped, startled, and nearly dropped the heady board. She stared at Anya, her mouth agape, a mixture of shock and suspicion in her eyes. "What do you want?" she yelled back, her voice thin against the gale. "I want to help you," Anya said simply. "You'll never get that up by yourself. You need to brace it, then drill pilot holes. Give me the drill." For a moment, Karen just stood there, indecisive. Her pride was at war with her panic. The wind gusted violently, ripping the plywood from her grasp and sending it skittering across the lawn. That decided it. Defeated, she pointed to the electric drill lying on her porch. Anya didn't waste a second. She grabbed the drill and the board, her movements efficient and sure. "Hold it steady against the frame, right here," she instructed, her voice taking on the unmistakable tone of command. Karen, surprisingly, obeyed without question. While Karen pressed her weight against the board, Anya quickly drilled 4 pilot holes, then drove long screws deep into the window frame, securing the plywood firmly in place. It took less than 2 minutes. "There," Anya said, stepping back. "That should hold." Karen looked from the secured window to Anya, her expression unreadable. The rain was plastering her blonde hair to her head, and her expensive tennis jacket was soaked through. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why would you help me?" "Because the storm is coming," Anya said, as if it were the most obvious reason in the world. "And that's what neighbors are supposed to do." Before Karen could respond, a deafening crack of thunder shook the ground, and the sky opened up. The rain became a torrential downpour. At the same time, a terrifying siren began to wail from the center of town. The tornado warning. "We need to take shelter," Anya said, her voice urgent. "Now, my house. It's safer." "What?" Karen stammered. "Your house has too many windows. Mine is more secure. And I have a storm cellar," Anya said, already moving. "Come on, we don't have time to argue." She didn't wait for an answer. She grabbed a stunned Karen by the arm and pulled her along, across the rapidly flooding lawns, through the gate of her fortress, and into the safety of her home. She led her straight through the house and down a set of steep wooden stairs into a small, concrete-lined cellar. It was clean and well organized, with shelves of supplies, a battery-powered lantern, and a weather radio. Just as Anya sealed the heavy cellar door, the power went out, plunging them into darkness. A moment later, the soft glow of the emergency lantern filled the small space. The weather radio was crackling with a panicked announcer's voice, and then the sound began. It was a low rumble at first, like a freight train in the distance, but it grew louder and louder until it was a deafening, terrifying roar that seemed to be right on top of them. The air pressure dropped, making their ears pop. The little house above them groaned and shuddered. Dust and small bits of debris rained down from the ceiling. Karen let out a small, terrified whimper and huddled in the corner, her arms wrapped around her knees. Anya remained calm. She sat on a small stool, her back straight, her face illuminated by the lantern's glow. She was listening, analyzing the sounds, her soldier's mind assessing the threat. This was just another kind of explosion, a force of nature instead of man. The principles of survival were the same. The roar lasted for what felt like an eternity, but was likely only a minute. Then, as quickly as it began, it was over. The sound receded, replaced by an eerie, dripping silence. They waited in the cellar for another 20 minutes, listening to the weather radio until the all-clear was given. When Anya finally opened the heavy door, they were met with a scene of utter devastation. The storm had ripped a hole in her roof, and water was dripping into the kitchen. But the house was standing. The walls were intact. They walked to the front door and looked out. Maple Creek was unrecognizable. Trees were stripped bare, cars were overturned, and houses were missing roofs and walls. Across the street, George Henderson's beautiful old home had been reduced to a pile of splintered wood. And then they looked at Karen's house. It was gone. Where her two-story colonial had stood, there was now only a foundation slab, swept clean of debris. The tornado had scored a direct hit. Karen let out a choked sob, her hand flying to her mouth. Everything she owned, everything she had built her life around, had been wiped away in an instant. Anya's fortress, however, had held. The stone and steel wall was completely unscathed. In fact, it had acted as a barrier. A massive oak tree from a neighbor's yard had been uprooted and hurled through the air, and it now lay across the front of Anya's property, its trunk resting on top of her wall. If the wall hadn't been there, the tree would have smashed directly into Anya's living room. Her fence, the source of so much conflict, had saved her home and possibly her life. In the dazed aftermath, the neighborhood came together. People emerged from their shelters, stunned but alive. Anya's house, being one of the few still habitable, became an impromptu command center. She fired up her generator, providing power for people to charge their phones. She brought out her first aid kits and her emergency supplies, sharing them with anyone who needed them. George Henderson, who had miraculously survived by hiding in his bathtub, came over, his face covered in dust, and wrapped Anya in a fierce hug. Karen was in a state of shock, wandering aimlessly around her empty foundation. Anya went to her, gently took her by the arm, and led her inside. She gave her a dry blanket, a bottle of water, and a warm bowl of soup she had heated on her camp stove. That evening, as the survivors gathered in Anya's living room, listening to the radio for news, Karen spoke for the first time. Her voice was quiet and broken. "The sign," she said, looking at Anya. "Your house number. I took it. It's in the trunk of my car." She pointed out the window to where her car lay on its roof, crushed under a fallen tree. "It's still there, I suppose." Anya just nodded. It didn't matter anymore. "I was wrong," Karen whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I was so wrong. Your wall, it's not ugly. It's strong. It's safe. You were just protecting yourself, and I couldn't stand it. I was jealous of your strength." It was a confession, an apology, and a surrender, all in one. In the face of real disaster, the petty neighborhood squabbles seemed meaningless. The fortress Anya had built to keep a hateful neighbor out had ended up being a shelter for the entire community. The wall that was meant to create distance had, in the end, brought them all together. Anya had won, but it wasn't the victory she had expected. It wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about the quiet, unshakable truth of her own character. She was a builder. She was a protector. And in the heart of the storm, in the ruins of her neighborhood, she had finally found the peace she had been looking for all along.